Alright, so for my cinema analysis honors presentation, I went with the director Tim Burton. Now, I know that the project has stated you can watch 2 to 3 films, but I went ahead and watched 4 films, and I will definitely say there was a lot of similar cinematic elements found throughout the films. I would really like to highlight the color symbolism in those films. I would say when I watched Frankenweenie and Corpse Bride, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Beetlejuice, I would say they did have similar color palettes where certain scenes in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Beetlejuice had kind of like a gray undertone to it. I would also say that Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie had shared the same color tones throughout the movie. And what I mean by that is kind of more of the grayscale to kind of really show that darker side of the film, kind of highlight that to viewers, I would say. The set design kind of goes in with that gothic and surreal look, so I would say across all 4 of his movies, they do have a sense of gothic, a sense of darkness. The Charlie and Chocolate Factory one, you may be questioning, but why? In the movie, when Charlie recounts his childhood days with his dad, there's kind of a dark undertone to it, because he explained that his dad was a dentist and that he didn't allow him to eat candy and such. And it just kind of showed like a darker perspective rather than one where it's normalized. And with that grayscale during that scene and having that explanation, that sense of like fear from Charlie, it feeds into that gothic and surreal look that the others possess, like Beetlejuice. A lot of the costume design feeds into that. I was going to talk about that later, but it does feed into what I'm trying to talk about. And so does Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie, the elements of it, and also the fact that they do use Halloween aspects, if you will. With Frankenweenie, the dog is basically Frankenstein. And then with Corpse Bride, it plays around the theme of death, which does relate to Halloween. All 4 of the films do possess outsider and misfit characters. So in Beetlejuice, we have Winona Ryder. That's the one. She's presented as the character that didn't really fit in with her family when they moved into the couple's house that passed away. So she seemed just kind of weird, kind of awkward, kind of in her own element. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie is the misfit character, the outsider, because as they go along throughout the factory and the group, he sees that he doesn't really have that bond with his own parents and that he doesn't really have friends and other people in his life. It's just him and the Chocolate Factory. Corpse Bride, the main character, Edward, and then the Corpse Bride, of course, they both have that awkwardness to them where they don't really fit in with the worlds that they're put in. Edward wasn't really fit into the Victorian world. He didn't want to marry that woman. And same thing with Corpse Bride. She felt as if she didn't belong in the weird, spooky, Halloween-themed world. And with Frankenweenie, the boy is very much the same way, hence why Frankenweenie was created, because it filled that void, that sense of loss that he had. And it just kind of goes along with the nostalgia and the childhood factor that we find throughout these films as well. I would also say the close-up angles really add to this as well. So in Frankenweenie, I'll discuss this later too, but in Frankenweenie, a lot of the film had close-up shots, especially with when Frankenweenie was created. And then with Beetlejuice, this is going to be another scene as well, but with Beetlejuice, there's another close-up angle, especially when Winona is getting married to Michael Keaton. In that scene, there was like a close-up, and it kind of just showed the vibrant colors and like what's happening with the scene, and it also added like a element of comedy, just kind of poking fun at it, but it still goes with Tim Burton's style. Visuals, makeups, and costumes, I will say he did a well done job with all 4 films. A lot of the visuals in regards to makeup and costumes were very gothic. Some of them had bright undertones, especially in Beetlejuice, but that was kind of more on the comedic factor, kind of making fun of the suburban idea of society. And then sound design. So I'm kind of talking about the sound design when it comes to more so the animated films like Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie. So with like Corpse Bride, like if somebody were to knock on the door, it was an actual like knock on the door, or the footsteps of the characters running through the alleyways in the other world. Or Frankenweenie, when they made the dog into the Frankenstein, hence the name Frankenweenie, the sound effects to it really added to the film, I feel. And then director style. So there is a recurring theme, and I feel like I touched on this in the previous slide, the recurring theme of death as a playful factor. So in each of the films, there is a gothic aspect. And I guess the theme of death, what I mean by that is like with Frankenweenie, we do touch on the subject, is why he brings back his dog as Frankenstein. Corpse Bride, the bride was dead, but she's trying to be brought back into the other world with Edward so she could be his wife. Beetlejuice is basically the theme of that movie because it's all about the afterlife, after death, what that world is like, and how Winona steps into it and almost marries Beetlejuice, but fortunately the couple was there. And then with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, there is that sense of death, because if I remember right, in the movie, he reconnects with his dad that's on his deathbed, and it's just kind of like a nostalgic moment, but it still feeds into that similar recurring theme throughout all the films. The consistent aesthetic example is that gothic, but also with the lighting and the color palette choices kind of feed into that more, I would say. The darker undertones when the story turns a little bit, or if there's something off. You see this a lot in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where when he discusses his dad or why he loves the factory or his Oompa Loompas, and when the children one by one get affected by the chocolate factory in a negative aspect, it just kind of shows like his face, like a close-up, and just kind of like almost like the brink of insanity, if you will. The visual storytelling, that's basically the sum up of all 4 of the films. There is a story to be told, there is a narrative, whether it be with the main character and even the side characters as we see, because for example, like the movie Beetlejuice, there is a story to be told there, and we see it's like a backstory with the couple, how they had the house and everything, they didn't want to sell it, but then they got into a car wreck, and then after that car wreck, these new people move in, the house is sold, and now the focus is on Winona and her story, and her navigating the world with the afterlife, and how she steps into that world but comes back into the real world. So we see that a lot as well. And moving on. So in Beetlejuice, I feel like I kind of went over a lot of these points, but just to reference some of my sources, so in the cinema of Tim Burton, in a lot of the chapters from pages 338 to 339, a lot of this movie is like a visual psychology with Tim Burton's style. So he sets the characters up as they reflect emotionally rather than an external reality. So like here we see Winona, and I just remembered her name, but Lydia. In the movie, we see that she goes through a lot of these emotions. She feels like an outsider. She feels like she doesn't fit in. And we see that, and she kind of reflects it more in an emotional aspect rather than a literal aspect. And it's done so well with the music and the bold colors used and the comedic references, because it kind of shows, it just kind of plays on society and how it behaves and everything, and the gothic effect as well. And Corpse Bride, I discussed this as well. The animation style is done well. With my other source with Backstage, Tim Burton's signature style Explain, this kind of plays on like the offbeat worlds, if you will, and it's between two trapped worlds of being misunderstood by society, and it really plays into that theme, I would say. And these are the two scenes, of course. I just wanted to highlight the colors on the left side, and then on the right side is just kind of showing Edward and the Corpse Bride and having that awkwardness, and it kind of feeds into how the characters are, and along with the animation style. And then we have Frankenweenie. This is the close-up shot, and this is just to show the grayscale and how that really plays a part in it. And so, according to Far Out Magazine, Tim Burton's cinematic style, we really see the stop-motion aesthetics in this one. The unbalanced, eerie feeling. We kind of see this with the black and white colors because it's not something that's as common as it once was. And there's definitely an emotional aspect in this scene as well. We see that he's trying to resurrect his dog into a Frankenweenie, so it's kind of hitting on that nostalgic level as well. And it has a narrative focus. And then the final film, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I chose this scene because I talked about it, I believe, a couple slides ago, of how when each child disappears, he kind of has like a sense of borderline insanity to it. And we see this, just like I said, in Far Out Magazine. We see that eerie feeling. It makes the audience feel a little unsettled. And taking it back to that ebook, it's like a visual psychology almost. And how the angles show those shadows and really highlight that color palette, it kind of feeds into how he's kind of outcasted as a character. And it shows like a morally grim film because we see glimpses as to who Charlie really is and how he feels about things, and it really has like a focus on the narrative. And then these are my MLA